Do you need this rigid subcompact 6.5-inch circular saw? We'll find out if you think so in just a moment. I'm Tim Johnson. You're watching Shop Tool Reviews. This is the RIDGID R8656, and it's their 6.5-inch 18-volt brushless subcompact series circular saw. So this is not a big mumbo jumbo saw that's meant to do the biggest and baddest jobs on the job site. It's a small subcompact 6.5-inch saw made to do a lot of your cross cuts, maybe even do some 45s, and maybe do some rip cuts if you really need so. But again, don't go into buying this if you're looking for the biggest and the baddest thing on the planet. This is a subcompact series 6.5-inch saw. Now let's take a closer look at this, and as always, we'll actually use it, then we'll come back and talk about pricing, warranty, and our thoughts on it. This is the RIDGID 18-volt subcompact brushless 6.5-inch circular saw. Now obviously, being a 6.5-inch saw, this is the saw that's going to be that lightweight saw that you can do a lot of cross cut with, maybe even cut some sheet goods, but just be that handy saw that doesn't have to do a lot of the heavy lifting, but can be the easy one to carry around and do those smaller jobs. Now what we get with the kit is the 6.5-inch 18-tooth carbide tip blade. So thin kerf, 5/8" arbor blade, and this is a blade left saw. We get an onboard Allen key or an onboard hex key so that we can actually take the bolt out. And by the way, there is an arbor lock right there to keep the motor from spinning, and it's going to be reverse thread to take this off. Then it's going to be left hand turn to tighten that up. Lock out the arbor, tighten it up, and then we can put our Allen key back away in the hole. Now this saw turns 5,000 RPM and has a max cut of 2¼ inches. And by the way, talking about cuts, on both the bevel and the depth of cut is tool free. So we just flip up the lever and we can adjust our cut from nothing all the way up to 2¼ inches. Now the sight line for the depth of cut is not the easiest to see because there is a little white arrow, as we can see through there. So we can see that white arrow, but kind of straight on, it's a little difficult to see. It's not really hard, but it is a little tough to see that white arrow. But right now I'm on 2¼ I can flip up the lever, and then I can set my depth of cut wherever I need to, 1.5, 2 inches, close that down, and now I've got my depth of cut. We'll check that here in just one moment. Same thing with the bevel. We have a lever here where we can set it. And by the way, one thing I like about this is we have white on black as far as the numbers. So we have white numbers on a black background. I can easily see my bevel degrees, and I can go all the way up to 50 degrees on that bevel. And I even have a 22.5 mark, and I can lock that down and adjust that wherever I need to. So quickly adjust both the bevel as well as the depth of cut without any tools. No hex key needed or anything. The dust extraction port comes on the saw. We don't have to put it on. We don't have to buy it extra. That comes already on the saw. And it's ready for both a 1¼ inch internal hose or a 1¾ inch external hose to fit that. So typically you'll have one of those adapters if you're looking to extract dust or extract the sawdust from this saw. Now typically on a saw like this, you're not a lot of times wanting to extract anything. You're wanting to make quick cross cuts and be on your way and throw the sawdust to where it may. So it's going to throw that out the rear of the saw, and we'll see how well it does that here in a moment. One thing we do get on the saw is an LED light right here on the front. We'll throw the battery in here. Obviously it runs on their 18-volt platform, and you see when I pull the trigger here, we get an LED light right here on the front of the saw. Now one thing I noticed, and we'll see here in one moment, it is definitely going to cast light here on the actual cut line in the blade area. However, it's probably not going to reach up here where we're actually seeing our sight line on the front of the shoe, because we've got all this kind of blocking that area. I don't think that's a big deal. Typically we can see that without light anyway, but just wanted to mention that the LED light is definitely casting some light down here right in front of the blade where we can look through that window and see our cut, but not up here on the front of the shoe. Now, in addition to a 2 1/4 inch cross cut capability of depth at 90 degrees, at 45 degrees, we're still supposed to get 2 9/16 inch of a cut. So in other words, a full 2x4 cut on our cross cut, so we can cut all the way through that 2x material. So we will test that here in one moment as well. Now, with the blade on and the battery on, let's get a quick weight of this. And once we weigh with the battery, we'll take off the battery and tell a bare weight. So 7 pounds 6 ounces. So 7 pounds 6 ounces with, I'm running a 6 amp hour battery on here. Let's take that off. So bare tool, going to be 5 pounds 12 ounces. So 5 3/4 pounds as a bare tool. And finally, on the rafter hook, we do get a rafter hook on here, and that's going to be fine for hanging on any 2x material, so your typical rafters. If you've got a double rafter, obviously that's not big enough to hang on there. That's not a real concern with this saw. Again, it's not a rear handle, it's not a big circ saw, it's not a 7 1/4 or even a 10 inch. So I wouldn't expect to see a hook big enough to hang on a double rafter, but just wanted to point that out. It's going to hang fine on 2x material, but not so much on any double studs or double rafters. It folds away, out of the way, or folds all the way up. Wouldn't recommend that. I will point out something here in one moment on this shoe as well, or on this motor sticking out, as well as that rafter hook. So I did want to point something out, that if we're using this with a speed square, which is pretty typical to make nice cross cuts, and we have this left of the saw, it's really not a big deal. No problem whatsoever. However, if we swap sides, so if I wanted to run my speed square on the right hand side and run my saw on the left hand side, right there you'll see that our rafter hook is actually hitting the square. So in a full depth of cut, so I've got it set, I've got the shoe set all the way down for a full depth of cut. We're hitting my square there with the saw. Same way if I came around this way, now I'm hitting the motor. Now there's a quick way to circumvent that. Number one, we can turn our square the other way, but if I just raise my depth of cut up to 2 inches, so I changed my depth of cut to 2 inches, and now we'll see. Have no problem there of hitting either the shoe or the rafter hook. So I just wanted to point that out. Now I've just got some pressure treated 2x material here. I think it was a 2x10. We may have ripped a few things with it. And I'm going to make a couple of cross cuts. I've got my depth of cut. Let's put it at its max. And let's just run a couple of cuts. One thing right away, as I mentioned with the LED, you see it shining nice and bright right here, right ahead of the blade, but I'm not getting a lot cast up here. Again, that's where I want it. Anywhere, that's where I need it. Typically up on the front, I've got plenty of light to see anyway. We're not cutting in the dark usually. So I can push this pretty hard and get it to bog, but it still cuts straight through, no problem whatsoever. If I let the saw do the cutting, I really notice no bog whatsoever. Now let's go ahead and put a 45. Now I've got a 45 on the shoe. So we definitely have enough blade out to actually cut through the 2x at a 45, no problem there whatsoever. I did notice that the dust port tends to get nice and clogged when not using a dust extractor. So it's not just going to eject that. It might be better off actually taking that off and letting it eject without the dust port on there. I went ahead and removed the dust port just to see if we get a different extraction, and I went back to a 90. Definitely ejecting that dust out the back now rather than just around the blade, keeping that sight line nice and clear. I have the shoe on 0 or 90 degrees, and I have my max depth of cut set at 2 1/4 inches or at max depth. And here we go. Did a pretty poor job of guiding that, but I was looking at a couple of things. Let me make a little bit more here. This saw definitely wants to kind of hang left a little bit, but I can guide it back on track. But one thing I noticed, it's keeping this sight line nice and clear of debris. It's not throwing it up here where if you had a line drawn that it would be covering that line. So it's doing a good job of that. One more. It definitely has the power to make those rip cuts. It's not going to be like your 7 1/4 inch or your rear handle saw by any means, but it's not meant to be. It's meant to be that handy, quick little 6 1/2 inch saw, so it does quite well in doing that. Dust extraction with the port on it, without a dust extractor connected, does not do a great job, but without the port off, which is the way you should run it, by the way, it exhausts all that dust very well and keeping it out of your sight line and out of the way. And finally, we're going to hook up some dust extraction, make a couple of cuts, just to see how well it does pull the dust. I can still see that we are getting quite a bit of residual dust and chips out the back of the blade that's not getting picked up by the dust extractor. And just make sure that we're clear. Yes, we are clear. So it's not the fact that it's clogged. So you'll watch here and we'll get a little bit of chips out the back. So dust extraction, not the best on this saw. Again, 6 1/4 inch circ saw, meant to do your rough cuts and cross cuts, so not expecting it to be the best at dust extraction. But I did want to point that out. Probably better off pulling off the dust port and just letting it eject. Feature-wise, this saw does very well. The R8656 has an adjustable shoe that requires no tools to adjust it, as well as adjustable depth of cut without any tools to adjust that as well. Goes all the way to 2 1/4 inches of depth, so we can easily make cross cuts in 2x material. Even at a 45-degree angle, we get a 1 9/16 inch cut, which is going to cut through 2x material at a 45. We tested that, you saw it, it cut through no problem whatsoever. Sometimes on these smaller saws, when you go to a 45, It's so minuscule the amount that it's actually cutting through that it doesn't make the full cut all the time, but we had no problems of any stragglers using this saw. Now looking at the dust extraction, it doesn't do a great job with the dust extractor attached or without. So I would say definitely remove the port, and it does a decent job of extracting that out the rear, keeping your sight line clear so that you can actually see where you're cutting. I don't see a saw like this you're really wanting a lot of that dust extraction anyway. If you're wanting to keep the job site somewhat clean, the dust extractor is going to pull the most of that residual out, but as I pointed out, you're still going to get a little bit of a stragglers coming through the rear of the blade and dumping out the rear. But again, you're keeping that sight line clear, which is the most important part when you're cutting. So you can still see that line, or you can still see where you're ripping. Weight-wise, this is a very comfortable and easy to use saw because it's not that heavy whatsoever. Even with a 6 amp hour battery, it's not very heavy. I believe you can buy it in a kit, bare, as well as with a 4 amp hour battery, saving a little weight. And if you wanted to even step down to a 2 amp hour, you could do that as well, but of course you're going to get less cuts. We made all our cuts with the 6 amp hour battery and still had a couple of bars left when we got done. Very easy to change the blade on this. The onboard hex wrench as well as the arbor lock right here on the saw makes it, again, almost toolless, but the tool is on board, so you can easily change that. Rafter hook's going to hang, as I mentioned, on any 2x material, any double rafters it's not going to hang on, but I don't expect that from a smaller saw like this anyway. Price on this, you're looking at $149 for the bare tool. So if you buy this without a battery or charger, it comes with the blade, with the wrench, and you're going to spend $149. Now, warranty-wise, I think you get a 1-year warranty, but if you register within 90 days, you get the LSA, or the Lifetime Service Agreement, which covers the tool for the lifetime of the tool. But you have to make sure you register the tool within 90 days of purchase, and you need the receipt when you actually register. You can buy it as a kit for $209 that comes with a 4 amp hour battery and the charger. Great little saw, easy to use, very compact and light, so you can carry that around wherever you need to, doing punch list items or just doing DIY stuff. If you need a good saw, this is a great one to do it. Great for cutting sheet goods, great for cutting 2x material. So check it out for yourself. You can find it at Home Depot or at homedepot.com. We'll have a link in the description. Also, keep track of us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you don't mind, would you hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already? And by all means, if you hated our video, then give us a thumbs down. But would you let us know in the comments why? Have a great day and keep smiling.